Hi, Crime Junkies. I'm your host, Ashley Flowers.
And I'm Brit.
And the story I have for you today is the shining example of why you should never give up hope and why you should never jump to conclusions. Because in the span of multiple decades after a young girl's death, a number of people come on police's radar who you would think just have to be the guy. But it turns out the guy was hiding right under their noses all along. This is the story of Wendy Jerome. It's about 8 p.m., November 22nd, 1984, when 30-year-old Marlene Jerome just jolts awake from a post-Thanksgiving dinner nap on the couch. She doesn't know what it is that woke her, but immediately she senses that something is wrong. And being a mother, her mind immediately goes to her kids, specifically her 14-year-old daughter, Wendy. And so she kind of pops off the couch and starts looking all over the house for her. She just needs to lay eyes on her and then everything will be okay. But Wendy isn't home. Marlene's husband, Wayne, tells her that Wendy went to her friend's house a couple of blocks away to deliver a birthday card. And this is her best friend that she's going to see. Her name's Sue. But that was over an hour ago, and she has now missed her 8 p.m. curfew, and she's about to miss having pumpkin pie, which is her favorite. And they'd all planned to eat it together after Marlene's nap. Now listen, she's only missed curfew by a few minutes at this point, but Marlene is just getting progressively more worried. So she calls Sue's house, though that doesn't exactly help settle her fears because nobody answers over there. So then she tries other friends who live nearby, but no one has seen Wendy. Now, despite her gut instinct, Marlene told our reporter that she was clinging to the hope that maybe Wendy had gone somewhere with Sue's family. And it's a thought that she holds on to for hours as she tries telling herself not to overreact. I mean, in 1984, it is wait it out or call the police, not a whole lot in between. But that last shred of hope that she had is torn to pieces at 11:30 p.m. when Marlene finally gets a hold of Sue's mom. Yes, Wendy had come by, but way earlier. And no, she hadn't been with them. She left their house at about 7:30. And Sue's mother must kind of get a rush of the type of fear that has been building in Marlene for hours because she knew something that she didn't want to tell Marlene over the phone. On her way home, she had driven by a bunch of police and commotion on the local school grounds. So as she's having this realization, all she can bring herself to say to Marlene was, "You need to hang up and call the police immediately," which Marlene does. And she said police were at her door within minutes. Now, she wanted to show the officer a picture of her daughter that was missing so he knew who to look for, but she said that he couldn't even bring himself to look at it. All he said was Wendy had an accident. And even in that moment, her mom is looking for all the explanations that aren't the worst one. She said she remembered thinking, maybe she got hit by a car or something. And you can almost pinpoint the moment in her story when the real trauma happened and Marlene's brain started trying to protect her from it, because the actual words that came out of the officer's mouth are fuzzy to her now. But she says that she just remembers he said something like she came across a bad person and somehow she was told that Wendy was dead. And to hear Marlene talk about it even 40 years later, it will rip you apart. I mean, right after she said that, her eyes just kind of drifted up and over. And I could tell, in that moment, she was right back in 1984. She has probably spent so much time in that memory. But before she let it consume her, she physically, in our interview, had to shake it off and keep going. Now, Marlene wanted to go to her baby. She wanted to be the one to identify her, but the police wouldn't allow it. And she was furious. She said she had this image of Wendy, naked, beaten, sprawled out in the snow, and she couldn't stand the thought of all these men there with her little girl. She was the mother who brought her into this world. She was the one who celebrated Wendy's birthday with her just a couple of weeks before, and now she was just gone.
And when she's imagining this, were they giving her details about what had happened?
Not really. I mean, and truthfully, they're still trying to figure out what happened at School 33. But the picture Marlene was developing in her head wasn't actually the one police were dealing with. And don't get me wrong, It was brutal. Wendy had been beaten so badly you couldn't ID her from her face. It was actually her school ID in her pocket that helped them get there. 2 of her teeth were found on the ground next to her, and the ME would later determine that she died from blunt force trauma to the head with multiple skull fractures and cerebral contusions. And she also had numerous cuts and contusions to her face, lots of defensive wounds on both of her hands, and there was a laceration to her neck that looked like it came from a knife. Now, it's not like a deep, huge wound like I've seen reported in this case, but a cut nonetheless. Blood had also pooled around her head. But the thing that I'll say is really different from what Marlene was picturing is she actually wasn't naked, though it was clear that she had been at some point and then had redressed because she was wearing unzipped jeans and a sweater, but her bra and coat were found kind of strewn about. Though someone must have been ashamed of what they'd done because they used her t-shirt and pink hoodie to cover her face.
And in all this, could they tell if she had redressed herself or if someone had put her clothes back on her
afterwards? Yeah, so we spoke to Sergeant Gus Finosa of the Rochester Major Crimes Unit, and he says that they believe she was allowed to get dressed after being sexually assaulted. And they're basing this off of the blood patterns that they have. And speaking of, so about 45 feet from Wendy, there were some blood droplets. So the theory is that Wendy might have been taken to this secluded part of School 33. She was attacked. At some point, she sat up in the spot where those blood droplets were, and then the blood is dripping from her having been beaten. And then afterwards, she started getting redressed, and then her attacker began beating her again. Possibly, they have a theory that maybe she even tried to run away. And was that the plan all along? Did she say something that made him realize he would get caught if he let her go? They don't know that part yet.
Well, and I'm thinking was he lying in wait for her? Did he take her there? How did this all even happen?
This is what's interesting. So the school isn't on the way to or from Sue's house where we know she was going.
Did she go to this school?
No, her 10-year-old brother did though. And it was really close by to her house, Sue's house, everything. So, I know she was familiar with it. Most likely the killer grabbed her or lured her from somewhere else. But this whole area, again, everything is within close proximity. I think wherever he took her from, he had this place in mind to bring her, though, because this whole area is pretty residential. Even where she was found was close to a street. But the one particular spot of the school where she was is kind of this alcove of an unlit courtyard that's protected by some brick knee-high walls and a fence. So this, plus the darkness at night, can give it a sense of seclusion despite, like I said, it's only a couple hundred feet from the street.
Well, and knowing all that, I have to think it was a little more premeditated than not if this guy, took her to this place that was not well lit behind a wall. He knew that this place was here, and he had a knife to cut her.
I was going to say, that's what he could have threatened her with to get her to that alcove area with him. But, you'd have to think that someone who was willing to do that would also be willing to use it, right? But speaking of the knife, they don't find any kind of weapon at the scene or any clothing or personal effects from the attacker. There were some cigarette butts and a lighter, according to the Democrat and Chronicle, though they're not totally convinced these are necessarily connected to their killer because apparently this is an area where people would regularly kind of just stand around and smoke. But that is not to say he didn't leave real clues behind, the biggest of which is his DNA, which they end up retrieving from a sexual assault kit. But they had a couple of things that were a little more tangible that they could actually do something with in 1984.
The 80s, right.
Right. So they had some foreign hairs, including pubic hairs, and a physical trail of blood that showed them which direction their killer took off in. About 300 feet from where Wendy was laying, blood droplets are found on the sidewalk by the school, on the side that runs along a street called Rosewood Terrace. And then a few hundred feet from that, there was a single drop of blood on the corner of Rosewood Terrace and Schaefer.
How do they know it's from whoever did this and not from Wendy trying to run away or something?
I don't think they definitively know that it wasn't, but it would mean that Wendy ran several hundred feet and then would have been dragged all the way back to where her body was found, which doesn't seem likely because there would be
more evidence.
More
of
blood,
that.
Right. We have a single drop on a corner. I also feel like someone would have heard or seen something more. We don't get anything like that from witnesses. And now listen, they end up typing the blood out, and it is the same blood type as Wendy's. So again, theoretically, yes, maybe it could be hers. I think that seems like the least likely. It could also be blood dripping from a murder weapon like a knife. But Sergeant Venosa doesn't think that's likely. He always believed that their killer most likely cut themselves during the attack.
And has the same blood type as Wendy.
Yeah, that was the theory at the time. But again, I mean, we also know the attack was very bloody, so they do not know for sure. They just know which way they believe this guy ran. But did he get in a car and drive away? Did he walk another 20 miles after leaving that final drop at the corner of Rosewood Terrace and Schaefer? They're not going to know until they find their guy. And when they look for their guy, there are 2 people they already have on their list before the scene is even cleared. In Wendy's pocket, along with her school ID, detectives also found a note that read, "I love Joey," in like bubble letters. Now, Joey was the top of their list to speak with, but first up was the 24-year-old man who actually had found Wendy's body in this alcove in the first place. This guy's name is Craig, and he tells police that he had gone to a nearby bar that night, but he didn't want to pay the cover charge, so he left, headed towards his friend's house instead, cutting through the school property to get there. And he says at first, he just saw someone laying down in the distance and thought it was somebody who was probably passed out drunk, but when he got closer and saw all of the blood, he freaked out, ran to his friend's house, asked them to come back with him and make sure what he was seeing was real. And the 2 of them ended up going to a neighbor's house and calling police together. Now, it's pretty easy to check this guy's story, the bar, the cover charge. They even interview the friend that he was with.
Well, and even despite all that, that would have meant that Craig called the police on himself, which wouldn't have made a lot of sense.
True, right. Police quickly realized that Craig's most likely not their guy. Now, they don't know who Joey even is yet, but they figure Sue might. And since Sue was likely the last person to interact with Wendy before she met her killer, they want to get in front of her. Now, she tells police that Wendy popped by a little after 7 p.m. They chatted for a little bit about sleepovers and birthday parties, like normal 14-year-old girl stuff. And Wendy mentioned to her that she didn't have to be home until 8:30. And though she didn't say that she was going to go anywhere specific before heading home, Sue kind of wondered if Wendy could have decided to go to their friend Amy's house. She was another girl who lived in the neighborhood. And interestingly, the route to Amy's house might have put her near the school, depending on which street she would have taken.
Well, and I'm also imagining their age. Like, she's there at 7. She doesn't have to be back till 8:30. Like, when we were that age, like, that means we were walking through the door at 8:29 with like 30 seconds to go.
Absolutely.
And like totally willing to ask for more time next time.
Yeah, and listen, Sergeant Venosa and Marlene kind of agree. She was probably headed to Amy's house or another friend's house. Like, she was probably going to squeeze out
her time.
Yes. But in talking to her other friends, they know that if that was her plan, she had to have been intercepted before she ever made it anywhere else, because nobody reports seeing her. Her friends also tell police that her death makes no sense. Like, she's just a typical teenager who loves to babysit, listen to Journey, and dream about owning a salon one day. No one has a problem with her. She's not stirring up trouble. And by the way, even Joey is kind of a nothing burger. I mean, not him as like a person, but like whatever they had. No one knows anything salacious about Joey, but they do point detectives to the one that Wendy would have been talking about in that note. It's a 15-year-old who went to the same school as she did. And he ends up telling police that, yes, they went on a couple of dates, like nothing serious. And the last time he saw Wendy was when they walked to the bus together on Wednesday before school let out for Thanksgiving break. He says he spent Thanksgiving at home, which his mother confirms. So they end up scratching Joey off from the list too, meaning that their killer is still out there and they have no idea who he is, and he could strike again, maybe even to the same family, because this is when harassing and threatening phone calls start rolling in on the Jerome family house line. On one call, someone said to Marlene, quote, "I know when your husband's gone, and you better keep an eye on your son." Now, police try putting a tap on the family's phone, thinking that this could be their biggest and best lead, but they are never able to pin this guy down. They think basically he was moving from like phone booth to place these calls.
And in any of these calls, is he asking for something or saying why he did this or anything?
No, I don't even think he says anything in the calls taking responsibility for Wendy's murder. I mean, this might be totally unrelated and just some sick person out there coming after an already traumatized family. So even though no one knows who's making these calls, this is still a place where everyone seems to know everyone, and everyone has a close pulse on what's happening in the neighborhood. So it's no surprise that police are quick to make a connection between Wendy's case and that of another call that officers responded to on the night of the murder. You see, there was this guy who we're going to call Dale at the request of Sergeant Venosa. And the night of Thanksgiving, this 29-year-old showed up to the emergency room, covered in blood and cuts. Now, Dale's story to doctors, and then to police when the doctors called them in, was that he was attacked by a couple of guys while walking down the street. Except when they tried to dig into the details of Dale's claim, which should be pretty easy to verify based on where and when he said it happened, they can't find anyone who witnessed this attack. They can't find any sign that it took place on the street he said it did. And Dale also keeps changing his story. So the police start getting suspicious, thinking that, okay, maybe Dale isn't the victim in this scenario. Maybe he's our suspect. And while he wasn't necessarily staying with her at the time, it is very interesting when they learned that Dale's mother lived on Rosewood Terrace, just a block from the school. Same street that the blood trails found on. And I told you, this is a close-knit community. And what's interesting is Marlene told us that she knew this Dale guy, kind of like tangentially. So at some point, police corner Dale. They tell him they know that he's full of it, and he breaks. He finally admits he lied, but the confession that comes out of his mouth is not at all what they were expecting. Dale doesn't confess to Wendy's murder. Instead, he said that his story can't be corroborated because there were no other men who jumped him. The injuries he had were self-inflicted with a razor blade so that he could get sympathy from his girlfriend.
Can that be fact-checked, please? And also, like, who is this poor girlfriend? Is she okay? Please tell me she's not, like, with Dale, because that's not okay.
It's unhinged.
Yeah.
And ladies and gents, some red flags are small and pink. Some are the size of a house and the color of crimson.
That one.
Yes, this is one of those. Someone does something like that, you run, because that is some master manipulation.
Yeah. So, okay, if this is all for her, like, did the girlfriend end up finding out? Like,
I want to do an entire story on this because I don't know any follow-up on this. Like, nobody seems to know, like, what happens with these two afterwards. I have all the same questions. I assume she found out everything because, like, I think they would have talked to her when they were checking this guy out.
You think they would have talked to her.
But I don't know.
Right.
I don't know if she got looped in when all was said and done, or if he just went home and was like, "Oh, honey, they can't find the guys who mugged me, and I was wrongly suspected of a murder." Like,
if he wanted attention,
dude, I know. Like, so my biggest question is, did they stay together? And I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, whenever you say stuff like that, I'm always like, well, we're like, it's on an episode now. Like, will she hear it?
Oh my God, if she does, absolutely, she needs to call us. But even though Dale was a bad dude, he is not Wendy's murderer. He is able to point police to the razor blade that he used. Apparently, he ditched it on the street. They're actually able to locate it, confirming this weird and wild story of his.
I mean, I assume they're also not just like taking that for what it is. Do they do a comparison of some of the physical evidence?
Yeah,
like,
so yes.
like check all the boxes.
Right, it's not just the razor blade.
Okay.
Like, again, no DNA to work with yet, but they do take hair samples and blood samples from Dale just to make sure. And of everything they collected, there was nothing to suggest that he was their guy. Mostly because Dale is a white guy, and the hairs that they have from the crime scene suggest that the person who attacked Wendy was black. But this gets police thinking. It wasn't just the hospital visit that placed Dale on their suspect list. While they were deep looking into him, they actually talked to a local 18-year-old named Michael Ross, who told police that while outside a bar a few days after the murder, he heard an intoxicated Dale say that he was going to get Wendy.
Wait, timing-wise, this is after she's already been murdered.
Yeah, that part didn't seem to, like, trip them up much early on, but, like, it doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
And now that Dale is kind of a no-go, what they're basically wondering is like, oh, could this Michael Ross guy, who is black and would theoretically be a better match for hairs found, could he maybe have made up this whole story? And why make up a story unless you yourself have something to hide?
Right, and like insert yourself into the investigation that way.
And I mean, on another note, Michael was known to be a violent guy who carried a knife. So when they go ask him where he was on the night of the murder, he's like, oh, I was just home watching TV. However, he did admit that he saw Wendy at an outdoor party near the school 2 days before her murder.
So he knew her.
Or at least knows of her from the neighborhood, but he swears he didn't have anything to do with her murder. Now, police start canvassing the neighborhood, asking around about Michael. And a pair of neighbors tell police that Michael could get violent and often wanted to fight. Another neighbor, specifically this guy Timothy, tells police that Michael was sneaky and he was someone that couldn't be trusted. Someone else talks about Michael chasing after a woman with a club once. And yet another tells police that Michael tried to burn down a house. They find another woman who lives nearby who tells police that she and several of her friends feared Michael. And by the way, Michael's own mother pokes holes in his alibi, saying that he went out at 7 p.m. on the night of the murder, so he wasn't just at home watching TV. And once they know the alibi is BS, investigators haul Michael back in, and surprise, surprise, he changes his story. He now says that he went to a restaurant and a pool hall known as the Greasy Spoon at around 7 p.m. before leaving to go home at about 9:45. And since they're thinking whatever happened to Wendy happened closer to like 7:30, in theory, this could clear him, right? But when police talk to the manager of the Greasy Spoon and show him a picture of Michael, he's like, nope, dude wasn't here. And what's so strange is like, they don't ever seem to get a real story from Michael about where he was that night. Or at least there isn't one that has survived old record keeping. But they did get hair samples from him. Also, something that didn't survive record keeping. So like, did they compare those hairs? What were the results? I don't know.
Yeah.
But whatever they did or had wasn't enough to prove anything. Because while he remained a person of interest, they didn't have enough to prove that he was involved or to actually arrest him. So whether it was Michael or someone else who committed this murder, police were going to need more. They were going to need a witness, a confession, a murder weapon. And over the next few months, they have moments where they think they're close to one or more of those. A time where a knife was found in the middle of the street a mile from the school, but it ends up not being the knife. A time where a man comes forward and says that he witnessed 6 black men committing the murder, but the guy admits to being under the influence the night that he saw it, and he had just been arrested for possession of stolen property when he offered up this information. So you could have just been looking to get a break with some made-up stuff.
Making a deal.
Essentially, that doesn't lead anywhere either. And this, Brit, is kind of what police are dealing with. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Every tip leads to more nothings. And even those phone calls that the family were getting, one day those just stop. And police never determined who was making them. So over the following months and years, it becomes clear that the only way they're going to solve this is through advancements in technology. Talk of DNA is just a whisper in the mid-'80s, and a whisper that probably wasn't even making its way to this little corner of America. So it's not until 1999 that police have the tools and the know-how to really make something happen. Using swabs from Wendy's sexual assault kit, lab techs are able to pull a full male DNA profile, one that is good enough to enter into the earliest form of the CODIS national database. But unfortunately, it wouldn't be that easy. There were no matches. So whoever this is has never been arrested after Wendy's murder in a state that collects DNA, or at least they hadn't been swabbed and entered.
Right.
I mean, there were a lot of cracks in the system early days, as we've talked about in plenty of other episodes. This wasn't a total loss, though. I mean, this DNA does help police rule out a few people that we've talked about, like Dale and Michael, who by that point is in prison for a sex crime.
Which I'm sure just made them even more suspicious of him, like,
when that happened?
all the years, yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, sometimes there are These cases that remind you why you need a really strong case before putting someone away for murder. Because even when it seems like all the signs are pointing to one person, like you get a situation like this. Michael Ross is a rapist.
He's a bad guy, but
he didn't do anything to Wendy Jerome.
Bad guy.
I know.
And what about the guy who found her? Did they ever go back and check him, like, just to officially rule him out for sure?
They actually did. So the Democrat and Chronicle had reported that by this point he'd actually passed away. It was like sometime in the decade or so since Wendy's murder, but they had his DNA on file after he took his own life. And because they had to do an autopsy, so they took it at that point, he ends up not being a match either. So 15 years since the murder, one DNA profile, and not a single suspect left on their list. Marlene explained to us what an emotional toll Wendy's murder took on their family over the years. I mean, Wendy's brother Bill still had to go to School 33, where Wendy was found. Marlene and Wendy's father Wayne, I mean, they really struggled emotionally after her death. It got so bad that Wendy's name wasn't even mentioned in the home. I mean, eventually it became so much that Wayne and Marlene ended up divorcing. And Marlene moved out of state. She tried to start over. I mean, it was like the only way she knew how to survive. But that's not to say she was like putting her old life behind her. She still wanted to fight for her baby girl, but it was hard when police kept her at arm's length. It's not like they had a bad relationship, but they weren't giving her the kind of case details that she wanted. And the more time that went on, as she kind of gathered bits and pieces from what newspaper outlets were reporting, and in the absence of facts that she had, like this already gruesome image she had of her daughter laying beaten and naked in the snow just kind of got worse and worse over time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure she had like worst case scenario images in her mind.
Yeah, I mean, she told us that she believed that Wendy's throat had been slashed open from like ear to ear. And listen, for many people, they might say that not knowing is better, but for someone like Marlene, like when you don't know, then everything under the sun is possible, right? Like when you know the facts, you can at least try to deal with like the one
know what
thing.
I can tackle.
Right,
Yeah.
and not the millions of things that could be possible. And like you almost go, what's worse, what's worse, what's worse? So finally she gets to the point where one day she's back home visiting Rochester. And she goes into the police station and she's like, no excuses. Like, it's been years. I want to see her file. I want to see the photos. And the police actually let her, like crime scene photos, autopsy photos, all of it. Like, they probably thought they were protecting her from the details all those years. But this is what she needed. This is what finally brought her even like a small sense of peace, because it wasn't until now, in this moment, while she's looking at the pictures.
Almost 10 years later.
Yeah, this is when she learned that Wendy had been found clothed that night. This is when she learned that the cut on her neck wasn't ear to ear. It was much smaller than anything she'd been picturing. But it was also in this moment that she learned that her daughter fought back, that she might have had time to cry out for help. And it makes you think back to when Marlene was woken up on her couch that Thanksgiving day. Like, did she somehow, on the most instinctual of levels, know that her daughter was calling out for her? This moment in the police station, like, it heals and then it hurts all over again. But at least now Marlene feels like she's in control, like she advocated for herself. And I don't think she ever gave up hope. But in almost every family I've ever spoken with who lives with an unsolved case, they have moments where they try and reckon with the unknown, right? Like, they try to make peace with what they can, come to terms with the possibility that there might never be answers. Because, like, how else do you survive? You don't give up, but you figure out how to keep going, fully aware that this might be the only reality you will ever get to know. Because it's not like seeing the files sparked anything new for her, and it didn't do anything for police. Right. So another, call it 17 more years pass, putting this case over the 30-year mark without any more significant breakthroughs. But sometimes you just need the right person to latch onto a case at the right time. And in 2016, that right person was Sergeant Venosa. Venosa told us that when he finally got assigned to cold cases, he went to the area known as the Vault Room, where they keep all their cold case files. And one of the files he started to look through was Wendy's. And he said the details gripped him immediately. So much so that he didn't like take this file back to his desk. He literally in the vault room just starts like pouring through everything. He couldn't even bring himself to like look away for a second. And it was the very next day that he called Wendy's mom to tell her he is now her new point person. I mean, he starts re-interviewing people, re-looking at old tips. And at the same time, he's sending off whatever he can to be tested, like the swabs of blood from the drops found by Rosewood Terrace. But those turned out to be too deteriorated to obtain usable DNA samples. So strike out there. And knowing his suspect isn't in CODIS, he starts thinking, okay, maybe this guy is dead. And like, that's why he hasn't hit their radar all these years. So how do you find a dead guy that you didn't even know the name of in life? Well, Sergeant Venosa started planning a way to compile a list of like age-appropriate Black male homicide victims since 1984. And by the way, now that they have like DNA and it's advanced so much, like all the testing, they are able to confirm what the hairs were suggesting early on. Their perpetrator was a Black male. But according to Sergeant Venosa, before he can even get this list going, something happens that changes the course of the investigation and makes things a whole heck of a lot easier on him. In 2017, a new tool was added to the Rochester PD's arsenal.
I think I know where this is going.
Well, a little, maybe not. So New York State approves the use of familial DNA testing, meaning they can use DNA from a suspect to identify potential relatives in CODIS.
Okay.
Right? Like they might not be able to get a hit on the suspect, but they can get a hit.
They can get close.
Right. But one step forward, two steps back, like always. They learn that they can't actually use the profile they already have that's in CODIS. So like, again, so much has developed, changed over the years. They have to basically submit a new profile, like a better profile is what they need. And when the state lab comes back after 9 months, it's bad news. The profile that they are able to produce has 15 alleles. And the rule was you needed 16 to do the search. So the profile gets rejected. Now, luckily, Venosa sees the writing on the wall, right? He is advised by techs and scientists that the testing is getting better and better every day. So he doesn't have to go back to making his list of dead men and checking it twice like some grim Santa Claus. They say, listen, just give it a couple of years. They still had more samples to work with, right? Like they hadn't used up everything. Give it a couple of years, the sample will give you answers. And sure enough, they were right. In April 2019, they send a new sample off. This one takes even longer than the first to come back, but in July of 2020, investigators are informed that yes, you have a good sample, yes, we put it in CODIS, and there aren't just one, but 2 hits from men in CODIS who are related to your unknown suspect. According to court documents, one of the hits came back to a man named Arthur Williams, who, I repeat, is not the suspect. He was related to their suspect, though they don't know how. So they have to do some backtracking, and it's kind of wild, a little convoluted, but I'll do my crime junkie best and give you the need to know cliff notes. So when looking into Arthur, investigators discovered that at one point he was pulled over for a traffic stop, and he gave police the name of a cousin instead of his real name to try to avoid getting in trouble because his own license was suspended. He gets pulled over, he shouldn't be driving, so he gives them the name of one of his cousins. Police see stuff like this all the time. Basically, in an attempt to squirm out of trouble, you use the name of a relative or friend or someone close.
And then whatever charge lands on them.
Right,
you.
And you pick someone that's close in age instead of your own, whatever. Yeah. So that's not what stands out to them. What stands out is that the cousin's name that he gave, they recognize that name, which we've been asked not to use. So I'm just going to refer to him as the cousin. But Venosa had seen that name in the case file that he has read backwards and forwards time and time again. Now, the name isn't there a lot, mind you, but back in November of 1984, a tip had come in that accused this cousin of bragging about the murder. Now, it's unclear if that was ever followed up on at the time, but this obviously cannot be a coincidence. Yeah. So police look into this cousin and they discover that back in 1984, he lived on, drumroll please, Rosewood Terrace, just 5 houses away from the school and only 3 houses away from where that last blood drop was found.
Okay, just to confirm, this cousin isn't the other relative that popped up, right? Like, this one hit is from Arthur, and this cousin gets mentioned, and then this second...
I don't really even know a ton about the second connection in CODIS because everything kind of like spawns from what they look at in Arthur, right? So this cousin was not in CODIS, which means it is looking more and more like it could actually be him because we know our perp isn't in CODIS. So this guy never did anything that would have gotten his DNA put in the database. But now they got to find a way to get this guy's DNA like surreptitiously. So they put this guy under surveillance for a week. They watch his house. They watch him get coffee from a Speedway gas station every day. They follow him to his security job at a hotel.
I'm sorry, security job?
Eventually, Sergeant Venosa snatches one of this guy's coffee cups from the hotel lobby trash can. It takes 2 days to directly compare. And guess what? It's not him.
How?
I know. Listen, it is not the guy, but this is still helping build a picture, right? We know our killer's related to Arthur. We know Arthur has a cousin who lives near the crime scene. Like, this cousin didn't do it.
But, like, we have a family.
Right. We're in the same family. So all of this is relevant. It's just like a bad game of hot and cold. And right now they're warm. So what they do is they go back to Arthur. They start looking at Arthur to see if there are any other men that he is related to that might fit. Now, they discover that Arthur's father died back in 1963, and his obituary only listed his children as Arthur and him having 2 sisters. But that's weird, because when investigators reviewed a log of who had been visiting Arthur while he was in prison, they show someone who comes to see him who lists themselves as Arthur's brother. And guess freaking what? It is another name that Sergeant Venosa recognizes from the case file. The name is Timothy Williams. This is Arthur's brother. And I don't know if Timothy sounds familiar, but way back at the beginning of our story in 1984, when police were canvassing the neighborhood asking others about Michael Ross, Timothy is the one who called Michael sneaky and someone who couldn't be trusted.
Oh, and is he actually Arthur's brother?
He is, yeah.
Then wait, why wasn't he listed in the obituary?
Oh, he wasn't in the obituary because Timothy's mother was actually pregnant when his dad died. And he's like born 7 months afterwards.
So he wasn't there to be listed.
Right. Now, when they start looking at Timothy's background, he checks a lot of boxes. He would have been 20 years old at the time of Wendy's murder, so like old enough to have committed a crime like this. He was living with that cousin on Rosewood Terrace, just a few houses from the scene. So see, it's like all connected. Yeah. And he too hasn't done anything that would have gotten his DNA put in CODIS. So they can't rule him in or out without a direct comparison sample. And it is a long shot, but Venosa sees a potential easy way to get one.
I've heard that before. It never ends up being an easy win.
Rarely, but you gotta try, right? Sometimes it pays off. So when they were looking at Timothy and looking at his background or whatever, Sergeant Venosa said that he had some priors for things like possession, resisting arrest. But there was also a sexual assault report filed by an ex-girlfriend of his in 1992. Now, he's never charged for this. It sounds like the ex didn't want to move forward. But at the time, a sexual assault kit was done. Now, to your point about things never being easy, Venosa felt like the odds of finding this assault kit after all of these years for a case that didn't move forward were really, really low. Especially because the evidence room had undergone multiple revamps over time and things were purged, whatever. But they are gonna look anyways. They go down to the basement evidence storage room. And we're not talking like just a room with neatly piled boxes. Everything is in this place. Like, it is a hoarder's garage full of stuff like bikes from the 60s, a bunch of doors that were even in evidence, like you name it. But get this, they find this sexual assault kit, and not just find it, but it is perfectly preserved and sealed.
Which, like, who were these people and why weren't they running every
Everything.
evidence closet ever?
I know.
This never happens.
So on August 11th, 2020, this gets sent off for testing for comparison. fingers crossed, investigators wait. Another 2 days go by, which, like, by the way, don't tell me DNA can't be done fast. Like, we're turning things around over here. And just like that, it's solved. Timothy's sperm matches the DNA recovered from Wendy's underwear. They have their guy after all of these years. But they need to do more of like a direct one-for-one sample, right? Like, I mean, they don't want anyone arguing anything in court.
Especially
like,
because like this
came from like another case.
That hadn't been tried,
Exactly.
convicted. Like, it's like very likely him, but without that ruling, we don't know.
They're like, let's get a sample from him right now that we know is his.
Directly.
Right. Well, what they have to do is they actually have to tap the Florida Department of Law Enforcement for help, because in the years since the murder, Timothy had moved down to Florida and made this like low-key, unassuming life for himself. The now 56-year-old was married to a woman named Barbara. They had a couple of kids. They're doing normal family stuff. Like, you know, he's a working dad. He's working, he's mowing, he's taking out the recycling. That is where FDLE pulled 2 bottles from to directly compare. One of them does match the sample taken from Wendy, and there is 0 doubt now.
So, okay, how did any of this happen? Like, did Wendy know him?
No. So this is what is so wild. Like, once they like had him in their sights, they even went back and re-interviewed some of her old friends. They were showing him old photos of Timothy, right? Not even the new ones, like back in the day. No one is pointing this guy out of a lineup. 0 recollection of him. So Sergeant Venosa believes that the only way this like probably would have happened is that Wendy ran into Timothy in front of the school somewhere around Rosewood Terrace. And this was just a random crime of opportunity. So on September 8th, 2020, Sergeant Venosa, along with 2 investigators who had been helping with the case, this guy named John Brennan and Gary Galletta, they head down to Florida to finally make this arrest. Gary Galletta had actually been among the very first to respond to the scene back in 1984. And now here he was, almost 36 years later, taking part in the arrest of Wendy's killer.
And that's like about as full circle as it gets.
Truly. And Sergeant Venosa told us about like the night before the arrest, like when the team is kind of like plotting this, planning this. They were all sitting on this hotel balcony, smoking cigars, drinking bourbon. And they were trying to plan, like, this is more than just going and putting handcuffs on this guy. They had the opportunity to really like paint him into a corner. Mm-hmm. And Sergeant Venosa and John Brennan basically came up with this idea that the 2 of them would approach his home while Gary hung back in the car, keeping a perimeter with the local police. And the hope was to get Timothy caught in a lie. They wanted him to say that he had never seen Wendy before, which, considering the DNA evidence they had, like, they would know that's not, like, they know that's not true already. But, like, then you're like, okay, there's no excuse of, like, oh, we could have had a relationship or anything, which we know they didn't have. And listen, this dude fell for it hook, line, and sinker. So the next day, September 9th, they show up at his door, and not wanting to tip their hand, what they did is they're like, hey, we're investigating this cold case. And we're looking at the guy that you said was so sus all those years ago. Remember Michael Ross? Like, let's talk about Michael.
Yeah, let's talk about him and get your guard down.
Right. So Timothy is like, no, I don't even know Michael. And I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't even live in Rochester in 1984.
Which is like almost a bigger, better lie than what they were hoping to get from him in the first place.
And it's just downhill from there for Timothy. Eventually, he acknowledges, like, oh, yes, I did in fact live in Rochester at the time.
Oh, okay.
He also admits, oh, yes, I had heard about Wendy's murder, but he still denies knowing her after they show him a photo. And that is all Sergeant Venosa and co. need. They place Timothy under arrest, and while he can protest all he wants, which he does, they know that they've got their man.
Whenever the suspect is someone like this, I always like wonder what their families knew or thought. Like, what does his wife think?
Totally blindsided.
Oh my God.
And Timothy clammed up once he was arrested, but Barbara was like a pretty open book with police. She tells investigators they got married in 1998. This is roughly like 9 years after Wendy's murder. She had no clue about any of this. The Timothy that they're describing to her, she says, is not the man that she knew all these years. She said he was never violent. He was never physical with her. She's like in complete shock. And you know who else is shocked? Marlene. Sergeant Venosa and his team still had to tell her about the arrest. Now, the plan always was to do this in person. So all the investigators go straight to her house, right from the airport. And it is there on her porch through tears that Sergeant Venosa gives her the news that I think she feared would never come. And Marlene becomes so overwhelmed at one point that she briefly collapses and her son Bill has to catch her.
Which I don't always know or even think about what order all this happens, but she had no clue this arrest was even coming.
No, no clue at all. She knew that they were tracking down leads and working they had been for decades, right? But she thought they were coming over, because they did tell her they were coming over, but she thought she was just getting some kind of update. There is no hint to her of something bigger. Now, heartbreakingly, the one person who isn't with Marlene when Sergeant Venosa delivers the news was Wendy's dad, Wayne. He had died from cancer back in 2011. All those years of guilt that Wayne carried for allowing Wendy to go out that night, you can only imagine what he would have thought of this. And Marlene and him actually had gotten back together, by the way. So those two were able to work out, their relationship and everything in his final years. Now, this feels like the end from the outside. Bad guy arrested, family gets answers, but it is so far from over. I think families spend so much time thinking about knowing the who, and they think about the investigation leading up to that there isn't a ton of thought about what the day-to-day is like after that and all the work that has to come after. I mean, true crime shows are partly to blame, right? They got the guy, the end. But there is a whole second wave of trauma that families have to go through if a case goes to trial. And unfortunately, Wendy's family was not spared of that. They had to do it twice. First in November of 2023, but then just a little over a week in, a mistrial was declared. And we don't have a ton on this. The specific details have never been made public, but essentially juror misconduct was the cause. Now, Marlene told us that the judge was furious and had instructed the jury members not to discuss the case. And she thinks this mistrial had something to do with them not following those instructions. But either way, Marlene said this was devastating. She told us the family was so upset. There was so much crying. And partly because, according to Rochester First, at that point in the trial, crime scene photos, autopsy photos had already been shown. And now the DA had to break it to Wendy's family that they're going to have to relive all of that again. So the second trial kicked off in February 2024. Enter one of the things that we probably don't think about. What happens when your daughter's killer wants to take the stand and lie about your kid? In this trial, Timothy does exactly that. According to 13 Wham ABC, he says that he met Wendy outside a store in September 1984, and at some point, they began a sexual relationship. Of course, he's like, I had no idea she was 14. She told me she was 16. He continued to claim that on Thanksgiving, the day of the murder, Wendy stopped by his place sometime after 7 p.m. They had sex without a condom, and then she left, and he says he has no idea what happened to her after that. That's the last time he saw her. There is no evidence of Wendy having any sexual relationship with anyone, by the way. This was just Timothy's attempt to explain away how his DNA ended up everywhere. And thankfully, the jury didn't buy it. On March 8th of 2024, they find Timothy guilty of all 3 counts of second-degree murder. And it was the first conviction in New York State using familial DNA. Marlene told us she was so elated hearing the verdict that she had to restrain herself from jumping out of her seat. And so a month later, Timothy was sentenced to 25 years to life. Following the conviction, Sergeant Venosa asked Marlene for permission to get a tattoo with Wendy's initials, her date of birth, and her date of death in honor of her. A request that moved Marlene to tears. And Brit, if things can't get any more emotional, it was so sweet. Sergeant Venosa also gave Marlene the handcuffs that he used to take Timothy Williams into custody. He even had them engraved for her. But I think this shows not only Sergeant Venosa's dedication to this case, but how much of a bond can form between investigators and victims' families when it is done right.
Yes.
Right is not easy, but it goes a long way. Sergeant Venosa had begun to think of Wendy as a little sister. I mean, even though they had never met. And he said that solving Wendy's case was one of the most satisfying points of his career.
That's
I
all
know.
so incredible.
We don't get it a lot. It's so easy for that relationship to go so sideways. And it's really wonderful to see a family feel like they got the support that they needed, the work that they needed.
And for the investigator to, like, identify and
I know.
connect to a case
I
like
know.
that deeply.
Yeah.
And through all this, Timothy, did he ever take accountability or explain himself in any way, like even after the conviction?
No. And this is interesting because according to Sergeant Venosa, in the years since Wendy's murder, Timothy has become born again. Yet apparently he didn't feel close enough to God to unburden himself of his ultimate sin, or at the very least even apologize for it. But apology or not, Marlene now has the closure she sought. Her years since have been about keeping Wendy's memory alive. She said that she feels as long as people are talking about Wendy, like we're doing right now, it means that Wendy is still alive in some way and that she hasn't been forgotten. When our reporter asked Marlene what she wanted people to remember most about her daughter, she said this.
She had dreams. She had her life all planned out, and she was working, even in grammar school, towards getting where she wanted to be when she grew up. She was a good friend, a really good friend, so I'm told. She was a beautiful soul, and a loving daughter, loving sister. She's missed every day.
Wendy's story is a perfect example of how justice can prevail no matter how long it takes. And hopefully it will serve as an inspiration for all those families out there still waiting for their own justice. There is still hope, and their time will come. You can find all the source material for this episode on our website, crimejunkiepodcast.com.
And you can follow us on Instagram at Crime Junkie Podcast.
We'll be back next week with a brand new episode.
Human beings are strange creatures. They orchestrate their own undoing for the most pathetic, unimaginative reasons you can possibly conceive. My. I've spent a lifetime looking into the dead eyes of people who thought they were clever, only to find they were merely sloppy, terrified, and fundamentally broken. I tell you, when a young man vanishes in the dark, the truth does not hide in the shadows. It hides in the mouths of those who are too scared to speak and too cowardly to be honest. You have to be kidding me if you think stories like this just happen by accident. The story of Christopher Cole Thomas is a tragedy of a young man who thought he was just taking a detour from his life. He was bright, he was driven, and he was walking a path toward medicine, but like so many others, he hit a wall of exhaustion and sought a temporary escape. He landed a contract job in Minnesota, a long way from the warm familiarity of Florida. And he found himself sitting in a car with two men he hardly knew, Julian Valles Jr. and Jeremy Carpenter. They were headed toward a holiday weekend, but they were not looking for turkey or family time. They were hunting for something that ruins lives, something that turns a simple road trip into a descent into hell. They were going to North Carolina to buy methamphetamine. It is just after 3 in the morning on Black Friday in 2016. Benson, North Carolina, is dead quiet. When Valles and Carpenter walk into that police station, they're not crying, they're not frantic, and they're not acting like men who just lost their friend. They're acting like men who are reading from script that has too many pages missing. They tell the officers that Cole, who was driving, suddenly turned paranoid, abandoned the car, and sprinted into the night. They do not know why. They do not know where he went. They offer a pathetic, half-baked rumor about Cole having mental health issues. But they cannot even look the investigator in the eye when they say it. They treat a human life like a piece of luggage they accidentally left on a train. The sheer audacity of the lie is what always gets me. These men went back to their lives, they went back to work. And they did not even have the common decency to call the boy's parents in Florida. They left his parents to find out from a police call days later that their son was gone. When Cole's father, Chris, starts pulling at the threads, the fabric of their story begins to tear apart. He finds out the truth through the grapevine. This was not a spontaneous breakdown. This was a drug deal, a high-stakes meeting with dangerous men in Mount Olive, a town where the line between reality and tragedy is drawn in blood. What haunts me, the thing that stays with me long after the badge comes off, is the internal state of these people. Cole, An intelligent young man who understood enough Spanish to realize he was sitting in a car with men who were double-crossing each other must have felt the trap closing in. His panic was not mental illness. It was the sharp, cold clarity of someone who realizes he is in over his head and surrounded by wolves. And then there is the cowardice of his companions. They spent the entire night weaving a web of contradictions, only to be caught by a piece of surveillance footage from a local Walgreens. There at 1:10 in the morning, you see them. Cole is walking, and Jeremy Carpenter is following him like a shadow. They were never alone. They were never just panicked. They were part of a transaction that went horribly wrong. The police work here is tedious, granular, and exhausting. You go through hours of footage. You stare at the screen until your eyes burn, looking for that one frame that changes everything. And when Captain Greg Percy finally finds that footage, the truth becomes undeniable. The story keeps changing because every time they are backed into a corner, they drop another lie to fill the gap. First, it was a random flight. Then, it was a prayer session at a church. Then it was the sound of a car door, then maybe gunshots. They played a game of musical chairs with the truth, and all the while, Cole was already gone. They held his phone, they moved his phone, and they tried to invade his privacy even when he could no longer speak for himself. You see, in these cases, the killers often think they are the smartest people in the room because they know where the body is buried. They don't realize that they have left a digital trail, a breadcrumb path of phone data and shifting testimonies that tells a story far more accurately than their mouths ever could. They held on to the hope that silence would keep them free, that if they just stayed the course, the investigation would eventually run out of steam. I tell you, they don't understand the relentless nature of a father who will not let his son disappear into the ether. This case is not about the drugs. It is about the fundamental rot that occurs when human beings decide that another person's life is a fair price to pay for their own skin. Whether Cole was caught in a double cross where they tried to steal back their own supply, or whether he simply fought back when they blamed him for the missing stash, the outcome remains a cold, empty space where a young man's future used to be. Every one of those men who was there that night knows exactly where Christopher Cole Thomas is. They carry that weight, and one day, the pressure of that secret will crush them, because a truth that heavy does not stay buried forever. It is time for someone to stop the theater and start speaking the truth. It is long past human beings are strange creatures. They seek meaning in the chaos of existence, often stumbling into the darkest corners of the earth in search of a fresh start, only to find the end of their own stories waiting in the shadows. I have walked enough crime scenes to know that when things do not make sense, it is usually because the people involved stopped making sense a long time ago. You have to be kidding me. You look at the Jameson family, and you see a desperate pursuit of a dream, a life off the grid, free from the crushing weight of their own demons. But the truth is rarely as simple as a change of scenery. I tell you, there is a cold, hollow silence that hangs over the mountains of Latimer County. October 17th, 2009, the day the world realized the Jamisons had vanished. A truck found abandoned on Panola Mountain, keys in the ignition, doors locked, and a dog left behind, starving and on the verge of death. A small, innocent creature trapped in a metal cage, while its owners simply cease to exist. It defies logic. It defies nature. When you find that much cash, $32,000, tucked away under a seat, you stop looking for a random act of violence, and you start looking for the secrets people carry in their pockets. And there was a letter from a wife to a husband, filled with the kind of vitriol that only comes from a soul being eaten alive from the inside. She called him a monster. She spoke of attempted murder, of spells, of demons, and of the desperate, gasping fear of a woman who felt she had nowhere left to turn. Was a murder-suicide? A family pushed to the brink by mental illness, addiction, and the perceived weight of supernatural forces? That is the easy answer, the one that lets everyone sleep at night. But then you look at the facts, and the facts do not care about your comfort. The family was found 4 years later, miles from their vehicle, in terrain that would challenge a seasoned hiker, let alone a man crippled by chronic back pain and a 6-year-old child. You do not just walk into the wilderness to die and leave your keys, your phone, and your entire life behind. You do not do that unless someone or something forced your hand. I look at the people on that mountain, the ones living off the grid, hiding from the world. People like Dan Clemens, a man with a past that smells of blood and convenience. They tell stories, they provide alibis, and they fade back into the brush. The investigation turned into a ghost story, a tangle of red herrings and half-truths. While the sheriff eventually walked away, convinced of a murder he could never prove. Follow the money, he said. But in the mountains, money is just another way to get yourself killed. The Jamisons were looking for a fresh start, but all they found was a cold, lonely grave in the mud. Somewhere out there, the person who did this is still breathing, still living, while a little girl who should have grown up is nothing more than bones in the dirt. It is a tragedy of the highest order, and it makes my blood run cold. Justice is a luxury, and in this case, it is nowhere to be found. The story ends in silence, and that, I tell you, is the worst kind of ending there is. Confronting the darkness is a heavy business, and I have spent my entire life walking through the shadows that other men leave behind. My. You see, human beings are strange creatures. They possess a capacity for depravity that often defies the boundaries of simple logic, choosing to act upon impulses so twisted that they turn the very concept of safety into a fragile illusion. I have stood in enough rooms, staring at enough broken lives, to know that the monsters are not hiding under the bed. They are walking among us, often smiling, often asking how they can help in the search for the very people they have destroyed. It is a nauseating irony that I have witnessed more times than I care to admit, and it always leaves me cold. Let us look at David Meyerhofer, a man who occupied the space between a local oddball and a calculated predator. He was a creature of habit, a man who played the role of the concerned citizen while his soul was rotted through with a need for power and control. It is a common thread among the men I have hunted. They suffer from a pathetic deficiency of spirit, a lack of meaning that they attempt to fill by stealing the futures of the innocent. They do not kill because they're driven by some grand, tragic destiny. They kill because they are small, frightened men who find their only sense of superiority in the helplessness of others. In the case of little Susie Yeager, a 7-year-old girl snatched from the supposed sanctuary of a tent in the mountains of Montana, we see the absolute brazenness of a man who believed himself to be untouchable. He was not just killing, he was performing. He was orchestrating a symphony of psychological torture, reaching out to a grieving mother to taunt her, to dangle false hope in front of her like a piece of raw meat before a caged animal. You have to be kidding me. To think that a man could sit there, knowing he had committed such an atrocity, and then call the victim's family to discuss their own suffering, to pretend that he was the benevolent keeper of their child, is a level of malice that few can truly comprehend. It takes a certain kind of ego, a massive, bloated, and entirely hollow ego, to believe you can outmaneuver the authorities while constantly inserting yourself into the perimeter of their investigation. He thought he was playing a game of chess with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, but he was merely exposing the architecture of his own pathology. Marietta Yeager, a woman whose strength serves as a rebuke to the evil that visited her family, spent months in a state of suspended animation, waiting for a phone call that held her heart hostage. The tragedy here is not merely the loss of a child, but the agonizing, slow-motion destruction of a family unit by a man who thrived on their despair. I tell you, it is an exhausting, soul-crushing experience to be the victim of a serial offender. He kept them in a state of constant, gnawing uncertainty, feeding them breadcrumbs of information just to keep the trauma fresh, to keep them under his thumb. He was a scavenger, picking at the emotional remains of the Jaegers because he knew it was the only way he could remain the central figure in their lives. When the investigators finally found the remains of Sandy Dickman and the traces of Susie at that abandoned ranch, the truth began to bleed out of the soil. It is a haunting thing, the way these places harbor the secrets of the dead. Meyerhofer was a collector of souvenirs, a man who kept the remnants of his victims like trophies, a practice that screams of a pathetic need to possess what he has stolen. He kept them because, without them, he was nobody. He was just a carpenter in a small town with a history of military service and a hollow center. He thought those items were his proof of power, but in the end, they were his undoing. The psychological profile developed by those early pioneers at the Federal Bureau of Investigation was, in retrospect, a masterpiece of deduction. They saw through the mask that Meyerhofer wore so effectively for his neighbors and the local police. They understood that a man who taunts his victims, who keeps mementos of his crimes, and who inserts himself into the investigative process is not a man who will simply stop. He is a man who is addicted to the thrill of his own transgression. He was searching for a sense of dominance that he could never achieve in the real world. So he carved it out of the lives of children and young women. I often think about the nature of forgiveness, a subject that Marietta Jaeger approached with a grace that is frankly beyond my own limited understanding of justice. She chose to rise above the bitterness that should rightfully consume a person after such an ordeal. As for Meyerhofer, he chose the coward's way out, taking his own life before he could be made to stand in a courtroom and look his victims' families in the eye. It is the final act of a man who spent his life terrified of being truly seen. He died as he lived, a shadow, a whisper, a man of no consequence who did terrible things because he could not bear the silence of his own mind. The world is a darker place for his presence, but I find some small solace in the fact that, at the very end, he was trapped by the very evidence he was too arrogant to destroy. I tell you, the truth always has a way of rising to the surface, no matter how deep you try to bury it in the dirt of a Montana ranch. Human beings are strange creatures. They love to talk about how much they cherish their kin, how they would sacrifice everything for their own blood. But I have seen the dark side of that coin. I have walked into rooms that smelled of secrets rotting behind locked doors. And I have stared into the eyes of people who claimed they did not know what happened, only to find the truth hiding in the shadows of their own mind. You listen to a story like the one about the Burns sisters, and you have to ask yourself, what happens when a kind heart, exhausted by a lifetime of servitude, finally snaps? It is a tragedy, one of the deepest and most complicated I have ever come across in my years of putting on the badge. My. You look at Barbara Burns. She spent 40 years playing nursemaid, breadwinner, and sister to Debbie. A woman who sacrificed her youth, her potential, and her own identity to care for a sister who, according to those who knew them, was often demanding, cruel, and incapable of understanding the weight she placed on Barbara. You have to be right there in the room to understand the psychological erosion that takes place over 4 decades. It is not a sudden explosion. It is a slow, silent wearing down of the soul, one indignity at a time, until the foundation is nothing but dust. Then the money comes, the illusion of a new life flickers, and when that dries up, the reality of their codependent cage slams shut again. I tell you, there's something profoundly haunting about living with a ghost. 6 weeks. 6 weeks is a long time to exist in a house filled with air fresheners, baking soda, and the overwhelming, sweet scent of decay, all while pretending that nothing has changed. Was she in denial? Was she trying to maintain the only reality she had ever known? It is absolutely unbelievable. When she finally confessed, she did not sound like a cold-blooded assassin. She sounded like a woman who had been pushed until there was nothing left of her. She told us she did not mean to do it, that she could not remember pulling the trigger, and in some ways I believe her. Sometimes, the human mind protects itself from the horror of its own actions by simply shutting down the memory. Then you look at the other side of the coin, the case of Marlene Johnson. You have a woman fueled by an obsession so dark, so sharp, it makes your blood run cold. She was not a victim of circumstance like Barbara. She was an architect of her own misery. She was someone who walked through life expecting the world to bow to her. And when she decided that Shirley Pierce was a threat, there was no stopping her. She hired private investigators. She bought drones. She turned her life into a full-time job of stalking. It is the height of arrogance, a total lack of empathy for another human being, to look at a woman as decent and hardworking as Shirley, a grandmother who was just trying to live a good life, and decide that she deserves to be erased. It turns my stomach. I look at these two cases, and I see the two extremes of the human condition. On one hand, you have the tragic collapse of a woman who is a prisoner of her own love and duty, who reached a breaking point that no one should ever have to face. On the other, you have the calculated, venomous destruction of someone driven by a selfish, possessive ego that refuses to accept reality. Both resulted in the loss of a life, and both left me questioning the very fabric of how people relate to one another. I have been doing this a long time, and I tell you, no matter how many crime scenes I process, I am still shocked by how easily a person can step over that line. It is a dark, cold world out there, and sometimes the monsters are not hiding under the bed. They're the people sitting right across from you, living lives that look perfectly normal until the moment they do the unthinkable. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the truth of it. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most pathetic, microscopic reasons you could ever imagine. My. You look at a case like this, and you realize that some people do not just cross the line. They burn the bridge behind them while they are still standing on it. I tell you, it is enough to make you lose your lunch. You have to be kidding me. Let's talk about 19-year-old Pamela Pitts. She was a kid with a bright smile, the kind of person who could make friends with a brick wall and have it laughing by noon. She was 19, vibrant, and ready to see what the world had to offer. She moved in with a girl named Shelley Norgard. Now, you have to understand the dynamic here. Shelley was a ghost, a drifter with baggage she kept locked tight in a trunk in her own mind. She had abandonment issues that ran deeper than a mine shaft. She was the shadow to Pamela's light, and in my experience, shadows do not like to be outshined. On September 16th, 1988, the music stopped for Pamela. She vanished. And when a 19-year-old girl disappears into thin air, you do not look at strangers. You look at the people holding the keys to her life. Her father, Paul, was living a nightmare. He did not know where she was, and a roommate, Shelley, was playing a game of smoke and mirrors. She was not worried about where her friend was. She was worried about where the rent money was coming from. That is a tell, folks. That is a big, neon flashing sign that says something is rotten in the state of Denmark. 13 days later, a man out shooting in the Prescott National Forest found what no man should ever have to see. At Gordo's pit, there was a pile of trash that had been set ablaze. He thought it was a stick, but it was an arm. It was brutal. It was demeaning. They had burned her beyond recognition. A cowardly act meant to erase a human life, as if it were nothing more than household refuse. You look at that, and you see the work of someone who does not just want you dead, but wants you erased. The investigators back then, they were doing what they could with what they had, which was not much. They chased rumors of satanic cults and ritualized killings. People love a good ghost story, but the truth is usually far more mundane and a hell of a lot colder. The rumor mill was churning, but the truth was sitting right there in plain sight, hiding behind a facade of friendship. Fast forward to May 25th, 1991. A body is found in a vertical mine shaft. It was a young man named Ray Clerks. He was Shelley's boyfriend. He had been shot in the head and wrapped up like a piece of meat. Now, you have to ask yourself, what are the odds? 2 roommates, 2 deaths, both connected to the same person. It is not bad luck. It is a pattern. And in this business, patterns are everything. When they found Ray, the investigation into Shelley finally gained some traction. They found her fingerprint on a flashlight in that mine shaft. How do you explain that away? You do not. She was there. She was involved. She eventually pleaded guilty to second-degree murder for Ray's death, getting 20 years. But the shadow of Pamela Pitts still loomed over her like a dark cloud. For 18 long years, the case against her for Pamela's murder went cold. Cold as ice. But you do not stop digging. You keep pulling at the thread until the whole sweater unravels. In 2017, a detective finally listened to those old jailhouse phone calls. There it was. The silence. The lack of denial when the subject of the murder came up. That, combined with everything else, was enough to break the case wide open. In 2021, Shelley finally admitted it. She said she hit Pamela, that she kept hitting her until she stopped breathing. She would not talk about the fire or the gasoline, or the attempt to incinerate the evidence of a human life. She walked out of the courtroom a free woman. Her debt to society, technically paid by time, served for a different murder. I tell you, it makes your blood boil. You have a woman out there walking the streets who took 2 lives, 2 people who trusted her. It is not justice in the way we want it to be. It is a bitter pill to swallow. But at least now, the world knows who she is. At least now, the families have the truth. It is a hollow victory, but in this line of work, you take the small wins and you hold on to them for dear life. You just hope that one day she realizes what she has done. Though men and women like that rarely have the capacity for true remorse. They only have the capacity for survival. And that is the saddest part of all. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you could ever imagine. Sometimes it is over a few dollars, sometimes it is over ego, and sometimes it is the cold, calculated destruction of the very hand that feeds them. My. You look at a case like this, and you have to ask yourself what truly lies beneath the surface of a polished, respectable family. It makes you sick to your stomach. I tell you, you have to be kidding me. It was February 4th, 1991. A day like any other in LaGrange, Georgia, until it was not. We received a call from Priscilla Matula. Her mother, 66-year-old Margaret Abernathy, was found in the bathroom of her home, bleeding from the head. Everyone thinks we are walking into a standard home invasion. You see a broken window, you see a stage scene, and you think you have a burglary gone wrong. But the truth? The truth is rarely that simple. It is usually far more intimate and far more jagged. When I walked into that house, I saw a bed with the covers turned down and blood on the pillow. Margaret Abernathy had been shot while she slept. She had the strength, that poor woman, to crawl to the bathroom, perhaps trying to clean her wounds, perhaps trying to survive. She was alive when we arrived, making those terrible, snoring sounds, the sound of a life being extinguished by a brainstem injury. She passed away shortly after. And the scene? It was an insult to my intelligence. The glass was broken from the inside to look like an entry point. The drawers were arranged with an artificial neatness, as if the perpetrator wanted us to see what they wanted us to see. You have to be kidding me. If you're going to stage a scene, at least have the decency to make it look like a crime, not a theater production. Then you have the daughter, Priscilla. She was the golden child, the businesswoman, the one who walked in the shadow of her mother's empire. But underneath that, the finances were a disaster. A kite scheme. Writing checks between banks, robbing Peter to pay Paul, trying to keep a sinking ship afloat. We found out that just days before she died, Margaret had been at the bank, furious, trying to strip Priscilla of her financial power. The lifeline was being cut. And for a woman like Priscilla, who lived on the illusion of success, that was a death sentence. So, she decided to make it a death sentence for her mother instead. I'll look at the psychology of it. It is pure, unadulterated greed masquerading as family duty. Priscilla lied about her whereabouts. She lied to the witnesses. And she tried to manipulate the narrative right up until the end. She was desperate. She thought she was smarter than the law. She wasn't. The hardest part was not the investigation. It was the sheer, cold reality that a daughter could decide that her mother's life was worth less than her own financial standing. You have to go to a very dark place to understand that kind of betrayal. We did not have a weapon. That is the hurdle in a circumstantial case. But we had the truth. We had a witness who saw her car there when she said she was miles away. We had the desperate phone call she made afterward, trying to coerce a witness into changing their story. When a jury came back with a guilty verdict, it was not a moment of joy. It was a moment of somber finality. She received a life sentence, a life for a life. The Abernathy family, a pillar of that community, was essentially hollowed out from the inside. When Nanny was killed, the family died with her. It is a tragedy of the highest order. And it reminds you that the people you think you know the best are often the ones you should be watching the closest.
We are all on the same page here. We know something is going on. And that was when we called the medical examiner's office and said, "Hey, please do an autopsy. And at the very least, if you're not going to do that, do a toxicology." And they agreed to it. Detective Motes of the York County Sheriff's Office was also notified of the suspicions of the family about the death of Steve. But when the autopsy report came in, it listed signs of heart disease and pointed to death by natural causes. The initial autopsy still showed that it was likely a heart attack, but they had to wait for the toxicologist's report to come back to finally make an actual finding. It would take a few weeks before those results arrived, so the family waited on pins and needles for the truth to come out. They just knew that there was something that was very wrong. When the toxicology report on the blood of Steve Clayton came back, it was shocking. It showed traces of several sedatives, including marijuana, temazepam, and Benadryl. But that was not all. The biggest shock in the toxicology results was tetrahydrozoline, also known as THC. It is the active ingredient in eye drops like Visine, Murine, or other over-the-counter eye drops. THC is not ever meant to be ingested. Given in small doses, it makes you feel very ill. It makes you nauseous. It makes you dizzy. And it will make you pass out eventually. But in large quantities, it is deadly. It shuts your central nervous system down, and it will kill you. The detectives learned that THC could limit the blood supply to vital organs, leading to a heart attack. When the body cam went up there, the Visine that you see was on the tall dresser. That is away from the bed. That is where he could not get up to get the Visine. Now, it was very clear this is not a natural death. Detective Motes needed to have a talk with Lana Clayton. 5 weeks after the sudden death of her husband, Lana Clayton was questioned by detectives. The detectives wanted to know more about the medications found in the blood of Steve. You know what he would say? He took Benadryl. It was a long list, but there was no mention of THC, the drug that killed Steve. It is colorless, it is odorless, and it is tasteless, which makes it the perfect thing to give to someone if you want to poison them. The level of THC in the blood of Steve was so high that it was clear that it was a cause of death. It is a lethal level, no matter what way you look at it. The detectives pressed on. Somehow or another, there was a large amount of Visine in his system. So that is what we are trying to get to the bottom of. I know he puts the Visine in his coffee. He puts it in there every day. What do you know about it? What I know about it, I know it makes you have diarrhea. There were basically two things that the police were now considering. One, he was poisoned. There was foul play. Two, he ingested it on his own, whether it was intentional or unintentional. But as police probed the relationship of Steve and Lana, they asked, "How has your life been?" Sometimes we would have fun and everything. And then sometimes I would be on eggshells. All the time I was on eggshells. Lana claimed that Steve had a dark side. He can be really nasty. What does nasty Steve look like? He is really verbally abusive, calling me names. Like what would he call you? I do not know, stupid, bitch. I do not know, just all kind of things. I could see it escalating until you noticed, just, try and stay out his way. After the interview of Lana, detectives ordered a search of the house. They were looking for cups or glasses that had a residue in them. They were looking for anything they could find that helped them determine what could have caused this or anything document-wise that would show trouble in the marriage. But during that time, Lana told the officer that she wanted to speak again with Detective Moats. Detective Moats recorded what Lana had to say. I told you a little bit about Stephen, that it was worse than what I told you. He was verbally and physically abusive. Lana, for God's sake, and yell at me and call me names. His anger built up, I would do something that would irritate him until the point where he would explode. Okay, what are you trying to do? Huh? After he had that incident, which he said it was vertigo, and I was taking care of him and everything, but I was still so angry. And my girlfriend at work told me, you want to get even with somebody, put Visine in a drink. It will cause diarrhea. It was then that Lana dropped a bombshell. When I saw that Visine on the table, it just came back to me, and I just took and squirted it. And what did you squirt it into? His water. Into his water? So you do not know the full amount. I mean, you just squeezed. I think I put the whole thing in. So the whole bottle? I think I did. I squeezed it hard. I just saw it there and I just did it. What are your plans tonight now? Just stay here. You will be okay. I know it is a lot on your plate. Just what if I do? What if I cause his death with the Visine? Anything else that you want to add? No. If there is more, get off your chest. That is it. It was a damning confession, but the detectives could not arrest Lana just yet. After Lana confessed, the police left. They got their ducks in a row as far as what charges would be made, and they were ready to come back the next day to arrest Lana Clayton. But early that morning, they got a call from one of the neighbors of Lana. They found notes of suicide. They were afraid that she had harmed herself. She knew the police were coming back the next day, and she knew they would have warrants for arrest. She turned the gas on and went upstairs and took some pills to kill herself. They found her unconscious in her bed. She was taken into the hospital where she was treated and ultimately released, and then immediately arrested on the charges of murder and tampering with food items. The family was informed of the arrest of Lana. A detective from York County called me and said, "Hey, Nick, I just want to bring you up to speed here." Lana confessed, and I pulled over right away. It hit me like a ton of bricks, literally like a baseball bat to the face. I answered the phone, and Rosemary was on the other end screaming that she killed him. On January 16th, 2020, Lana accepted a plea deal and admitted guilt on charges of voluntary manslaughter and tampering with a drug or food product. The original indictment was for murder. You were pleading to a lesser offense, voluntary manslaughter. My own knowledge of it was by watching movies and the cause of discomfort and diarrhea. Lana insisted she never intended for Steve to die and just wanted revenge for his abuse. But his friends and family did not buy that. Steve was ever abusive. She tried to assassinate the character of Steve because other people who knew him and who he had. Menard came forward to say he was a wonderful person. There was no abuse of any sort with Stephen. She was trying to do whatever she could to save herself from a very, very, very long sentence and possibly the death penalty. But he was a gentle soul, not capable of harming someone. Based on the toxicology report, the prosecutors believe Steve suffered for 3 days before dying. Lana told us that the fatal dose was on Thursday morning. But we know as a matter of scientific fact from the toxicologist that is impossible. He would have died Thursday morning if he had ingested that Thursday morning. For him to have been sick all of that time, it indicates that she continually gave him medication throughout that time, poisoned him with Visine little by little. And Lana, a nurse, never sought to help him after the initial poisoning. Stephen would not have stayed in a urine-soaked mattress. He was a clean freak. He would not have stood for such a thing. He was too weak to get up and move. There was no phone in the house. There was no landline, so he could not call somebody. So this put him in a situation of being tortured with no way to get help. And so finally, she knew Saturday, that is it, and she squeezed a whole bottle of Visine into his water, had him drink it, and then went out to mow the grass, so she did not have to watch the horror of his death. Instead of a nurse that helps, she is the nurse from hell. 53-year-old Lana Clayton was sentenced to 25 years in prison. She never admitted that she intended to kill Steve, but the facts show otherwise. I feel like there is no penalty that would have been great enough for Lana. This was 3 days of methodically poisoning my best friend, and then killing him. The thought process that had to go into her putting on this charade. And she carried that right on through till the end, and I think that is the definition of a monster. But Lana almost got away with it. There almost was not an autopsy. If there had not been an autopsy, the ruling of the coroner would have been, this was likely a heart episode, and it was natural causes. The truth is she did this to herself, you know? Had she been just the same quiet, gentle Lana, grieving the loss of Steve, no one would have had any suspicion whatsoever. Although Lana insisted the death of Steve was unintentional, his family and the prosecution believed it was a deliberate act motivated by financial gain. One obvious and glaring motive is the wealth of Steve. Without a will in the state of South Carolina, everything goes to the spouse. So Lana would know, if Steve is gone, I get everything. If somebody wanted to do something malicious like this, all they had to do was get rid of the will, and everything belonged to them. The family tried to move on without Steve in their lives. Hello. I mean, I miss a lot about Steve, but I miss his voice. I miss hearing his voice. This is my way of, getting away from the emotional stuff. I think what I miss about Steve is his over-the-top personality. This big, boisterous, gregarious character that enters a room and just takes over everything. Steve was an amazing person. It has been difficult not having him around. The thing I miss the most about Steve is his laughter and his ability to light up a room. Stephen was stolen from everyone who loved him. This is the story of a successful and generous businessman. He was a man who lived with an infectious energy, greeting the world with a repeated, enthusiastic, hello. He was the kind of person who could fill any room he entered with his boisterous presence and genuine warmth. It was in the midst of his busy life that he met a nurse who seemed, at first glance, to be his perfect complement. She struck everyone as being very quiet, very sweet, and very nice. To those who knew him, it was clear that he fell head over heels in love with her. He could not hide the feelings he had for her, nor did he want to. He was very much in love with her. However, the path of love does not always run smooth. And when a strange sickness began to consume their marriage, those closest to them just knew that there was something very wrong. Money, as they would soon discover, is no protection against the darkness that can hide within a home. This is not a natural death. Welcome. Tonight we celebrate the joining of two wonderful people. It is March 10th, 2007 in Miami. It is a big day for bride Rosemary Clayton and her family. She is finally marrying her love, William Leslie. That is the oldest brother of Rosemary, 52-year-old Steve Clayton, proudly walking her down the aisle. 11 months prior to the wedding, they lost their dad. Rosemary asked her brother if he would step in. Of course, there were a lot of tears. She could not imagine anybody else standing in place for her father. Who gives this woman to be married to this man? Steve responded, I do, in the memory of my father. It was sentimental to be gathered at something so special where their father was not present. With their father's passing, the brother of Rosemary, Steve, is now the head of the family. And though he has never had children of his own, he has always been a father figure to his siblings. When his father and mother were married, Steve was just about 2 or 3 years old. He had 4 sisters, and Rosemary is the youngest. He was 10 years older than her, so there really was not a moment when Steve was not in her life. Steve was her big brother, and he was her hero. He was everything a little girl would want in a big brother. He played football and he wrestled in high school. That really made him bigger than life for her. After high school, Steve graduated from college with a degree in finance and quickly matured into a shrewd businessman. Steve, with a partner, started a company called Physical Therapy Resources. That company eventually became a national entity with physical therapy centers all over the country. Steve and Rosemary met at work. He was in the hospital, and she was in the same hospital. And that is how they met and became friends. He was very successful and eventually sold his interest in his business. Basically, from that point on, he was retired. His goal was to retire at the age of 40. He missed it by 1 year, retiring when he was 41. Selling his business freed up Steve to do whatever he wanted. And what he wanted to do was give back. He would mentor a large group of young men, helping them start up a business or helping them find out what direction they wanted their life to go. Steve was extremely generous, not only with his resources, but with his time. Steve always had time for his family. Rosemary films as Steve teases their Uncle Max. It is special. Their dad was not so funny. He was more serious, much more serious. He was always serious. But where did that money come from? Steve? I do not know. And when his sister Rosemary gets married, it is the good humor of Steve that makes him the life and soul of the occasion. Please get up, Steve, plate. Steve was always the first guy to get up to give a toast anywhere. Hello, hello, hello. It was always ad-lib for him, straight from the heart. This is my way of getting away from the emotional stuff. William, thank you so much. I'm not going to look at you. Thank you so much for making my sister so happy. And my dad, Steve is never one to hide his emotions. My dad told me before he passed to take care of my sister, to honor you, and he loved you very much. I have to get serious here. All right, I am cool. All right, you guys are great companions. You are great partners. And my sister, I have never seen her happier. After the speeches, Steve stepped up for the father-daughter dance. He came up and they got ready to dance. And before the music started, they had a very, very powerful moment. A surprise recording of their dearly departed father played out. The best moment of my day was when you were climbing my knee. You would say, "Daddy, I love you." I miss those days. I really do, because I love you too. He had so many duties that day. He was a father. He was the best man. He was the entertainment. He was the one that kept everyone calm, kept everyone laughing. He was a natural at it. Despite his success and close network of family and friends, the own romantic life of Steve had been rocky. He looked for a partner that was as focused, determined, loving, and caring as he was, and that is a tall order to fill. Now 52, his family figured it would take a very special person to sweep him off his feet. Rosemary thinks that Steve was always looking for somebody on a level he could connect with, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. But 3 years later, that is exactly what happened. In late 2009, Steve decided to leave his home state of Florida for a change of pace in North Carolina. He really loved being physical. He loved walking. He loved anything to do with being outdoors. So when he moved from South Florida to North Carolina, he had the opportunity to be outdoors a lot more. Within just a few months, Steve announced that he had met someone special. He seemed to have a glow that he had been missing for a little while, and he was excited. Her name was Lana Walsh, 12 years his junior. She was a nurse who grew up in Oklahoma. She struck Rosemary as being very sweet, very quiet, but very sweet. And this quiet kind of stood out because Steve was not very quiet. The personality of Steve was gigantic. She was more like a wallflower. Despite their differences, Steve was sure she was the one. They were very affectionate with each other, always arm in arm. Steve was always hugging her, squeezing her, kissing her. Rosemary felt happy for her brother. So, of course, anybody that he loved, she was going to embrace. It was not long before Steve asked Lana to move in with him. After they got to know each other quite a bit more, Steve persuaded her to come to Charlotte, and, you know, Steve can be very convincing. They added some new additions to the family. The first dog that Steve and Lana got was Guinness, an Italian greyhound. They loved the breed, and so they decided that they wanted another one, and her name was Sadie. With Lana, Steve finally felt he had found his missing piece. Steve always had great things to say about her. He referred to her as his Lana Sue. He could not hide the feelings he had for her. He was very much in love with her. Rosemary thinks Steve found himself well grounded with Lana. She felt like Steve found a certain sense of peace with her. Steve Clayton came to North Carolina for a change from his old life and found a whole new future. When Steve Clayton danced with his sister at her wedding, he dreamed of finding his own special someone, and now, 6 years later, he was about to marry the love of his life, a Veterans Affairs nurse named Lana Walsh. It was a lovely day in November 2013. Many of the family had traveled to North Carolina just to be there and enjoy that day with him, and he made it very special for everyone. The wedding of Lana and Steve took place at their house in Charlotte. It was such a beautiful event. You could just see the love. Just beaming. Both of them were. Soon after, the couple decided to relocate and move into their forever home, just over the border in South Carolina, on the banks of Lake Wylie. It was like something on a postcard. This gorgeous ocean blue home sitting on a gorgeous piece of lakefront property was very lovely. The couple set about refurbishing their new home, decorating it with a collection of artworks and antiques of Steve. Steve was the kind of person for whom objects were very personal, and he was very proud of his possessions. They were all unique in some way. The move allowed the couple to indulge in their love of nature. So, if there was something fun and outdoorsy to do, he was going to be the first one there, and he was gung-ho about it. Their relocation to South Carolina also meant the pair were closer to the extended family of Steve. His nephew, who married the niece of Steve in 2010, said that they hung out with Steve and Lana a lot when they moved up there. They would go out to dinner with them, they would go to concerts, and they would go to special events every holiday. They were also just a 30-minute drive from the son and grandchildren of Lana, and the pair never said no to a bit of babysitting. Steve had a way with children because Steve had always been a child at heart. So, he was the kind of guy that got down on the floor and played with the kids. Pop goes the weasel. And with the kids around, there was never a dull moment in the Clayton household. Here, Lana filmed Steve attempting to describe the limbo while her twin granddaughters watched. We will make Papa do it. So there's a stick, and I have to go like that, and I have to go under the stick, and I have to get real low to get under the stick. It is a game. It is a dance. These are dances. You have to tell me how to act it out. Lana was tickled, but the twins were more interested in their ice cream. Steve enjoyed playing all kinds of games, whether it was Scrabble or even a silly child's game. You want to get in do not you? You do not you? Just spin the spinner, and then turn the handles many times. 2, and put your head in the thing. Put your chin on the thing. Okay, A, E, D, F, spin it forward. Both of them, or one. Both of them. Steve was a huge teddy bear. They loved to play with him. He always had kids hanging on him. What number did you get? 3. And Lana was always game for some fun, too. Oh, no, it is coming up. It does it every time. Here it comes. Cheers. 5 years into their marriage, Steve and Lana appear to be thriving. But in June 2018, Steve suddenly fell ill. He said he felt dizzy, complaining of vertigo. He said that his ear hurt and that he felt nauseous, and he started getting sick in the yard. Rosemary felt real bad for him. She knew that he had had issues with vertigo prior to this. He said he had been very ill and did not know exactly what was wrong. He just remembers that he was working out in the garden, and he started to feel dizzy, a little nauseous, a little dizzy headache, and he thought that maybe he had gotten sunstroke. You okay? Yeah. As a nurse, Lana thought the best thing for Steve was bed rest. He said he remembered laying down, and he said the next time he opened his eyes, 36 hours had passed. Worried, Rosemary called Lana to see if she could explain the mystery illness of Steve. I asked her what she thought was going on, because that is very odd for any person of any age to lose 36 hours of time. And she said that he was fine, and that she was watching him, and she was making sure he was okay. Though he had never been ill like this before, Lana thought that Steve was just exhausted. Rosemary felt reassured that Lana was there to take care of him in any way that she could, especially with her knowledge as a nurse. It seemed the larger-than-life energy of Steve was starting to catch up with him. But just 2 weeks later, it appeared the treatment of Lana had worked. Steve was back to his old self, throwing a party for the 4th of July. That party was just as great as every other party they had been to there. Steve was his normal affectionate self. Everybody had a great time. Here is Steve dancing with Lana as they celebrate in style. He grabbed Lana right away, and they just kind of followed suit and all joined in. Rosemary remembered watching them hug and him kiss her, and they were completely in love. Things were good at the Clayton home, and no one doubted the lives of Lana and Steve were going to be happy and long. On July 21st, 2018, a call came in to York County 911. Police units arrived on the scene, and body cam footage recorded by responding Officer Sergeant Day captured what they found. As they walked into the front door, there was Steve right at the bottom of this grand staircase. And unfortunately, at that point, he was gone. He was dead. You hear him kind of whispering and talking in low voices. That is because Lana Clayton was just around the corner, distraught and crying. So they did not want to say anything that was disturbing to her. So she said she left the next day, did not put anything, just his wife and family. Sergeant Day needed to talk with the wife of Steve, Lana, to find out what had happened. Ma'am, I am Sergeant Day. I am going to be here for just a little while until the coroner gets here and transporting those things. Oh, no, ma'am. I am just fine. It feels good to me to stand if I am not making you uncomfortable. Lana told Sergeant Day that Steve had been suffering dizziness for 2 days. Stephen had been very ill with vertigo. She had found him Thursday morning, that he stood up, got very dizzy, and collapsed, that she had to help him upstairs. And since that time, he had not been back downstairs. Miss Clayton, you were outside. You were working outside? I was mowing the lawn real quick, and when I came in, I fell down. I am so sorry. I tried to take a blanket underneath me, but I could not. Despite her training, Lana was unable to render aid to Steve. That is when she, I think, really panicked because she knew she could not do anything further to help him. And so she immediately ran out when she heard the motorcycle coming by to wave someone down to call 911. The nephew, Nick French, was on duty as a police officer when he got the news. My mom called and she said, Uncle Steve died. And, just kind of disbelief. I mean, I knew it was for real, but, it did not really sink in. So I got down there as quick as I could. I just remember the whole time going through my head was, how? Why? The phone rang, and I saw that it was my nephew calling. He said, Uncle Steve died. Uncle Steve died. That was not possible. It was not possible. How could he be gone? No, I could not believe it. With Rosemary 700 miles away, Nick and his family rallied around Lana. I felt awful because I knew she loved Uncle Steve, and I just kept thinking, I am upset right now, but I cannot imagine what she's going through to find her husband, on the ground like this. Lana feared the vertigo of Steve could have caused a fall down the stairs. She kept saying that. I think he fell down the stairs, and that is horrible, and I hope he did not. Sergeant Day checked for any signs that Steve may have been attacked. This looked like it was probably a natural death, but you never know. So Sergeant Day did at that point go upstairs to look to see what had happened. That would be a little unnerving to just go through a labyrinth of a house that you had never seen before, because you never know what could be around the corner. You can tell that there does not appear to be a sign of struggle. No other signs of someone else being up there having done something to him. Nothing significant at all. In the master bedroom, the bed sheet was all rumpled up, but nothing to suggest Steve had any kind of struggle. It looked as if the cause of death would not be a mystery for the coroner. The coroner could not see any contusions or bruises. Nothing suggested Steve fell down the staircase. So she put the floor to under him? Yeah, she tried to move it. It looks as though Steve made it to the bottom of the stairs and then collapsed. The coroner said, I believe he had a heart attack. And I kind of said, what leads you to that opinion? And she said, well, the coloration of his face. There was blueness that went across the top of the chest almost in a line, and that oftentimes, according to the coroner, is an indication that he may have had a heart attack. Back in the living room, Sergeant Day told Lana what they thought had happened. When I walked to the top of the stairs, I noticed that the carpet on the staircase kind of has a direction to it. So, I can see footprints. I think he may have come to the bottom of the staircase. Do not dwell on the staircase, because I know that is a hard claim to make. I do not know how he made it. I do not know what he was thinking. I think this was the day God chose. That is what I told him. While Lana digested the news, Nick and his family helped with cleaning up. We wanted to make the house still comfortable enough for her. We knew she was going to be exhausted and she had to spend the night there, but they were shocked at what they found in the bedroom. When we went upstairs, I immediately noticed a smell. It was a smell of human filth, excrement, urine. So we looked around, and there were huge urine discoloration spots in the middle of the bed. The soiled mattress raised some questions. So I am thinking the amount of urine that it would take to soak through this mattress. Steve had to have been going to the bathroom in this bed for days. So we immediately thought, we have to get this mattress out of the room. We could barely pick it up. It was extremely heavy. We took the mattress and we tossed it out of the house. When Rosemary talked with Lana on the phone, she asked her, how did Steve get so ill? Hello? When I spoke with Lana much later in that evening, I asked her what happened. And she said he had not been feeling well for a few days. And I said, well, why did not you call somebody? Why did not you let somebody know? And she said, well, he was starting to feel better. She says Steve never called because he had been sleeping heavily and misplaced his cell phone a week. Earlier, Lana claimed that it had been missing for several days. My brother was never, ever without his phone. He just was always attached to his phone. It went everywhere with him. It was at that point where I really felt like something very sinister was going on, and I did not know what it was. The sister of Steve, Rosemary, asked his widow, Lana, about his will. Steve and I had talked many times about what it was that he wanted to do when that time came, and he wanted to be buried in that beautiful cemetery in Fort Lauderdale. When I asked Lana, she said there is no will. Lana had already made the arrangements. Steve was due to be cremated, and she was planning his memorial. On August 4th, 2018, Lana held a service for Steve at their home. It was highly emotional. Everybody there felt such a deep connection to Steve. It was just hard to stay calm. Even though it was supposed to be a celebration of his life, it just could not help but feel the deep, deep sorrow that everybody felt. If there is any space that it is okay to be sad and to cry a little bit, this is that time. And I think that it is okay today that we celebrate a life well lived and at the same time be sad. At the memorial, Rosemary and the family were surprised to find Lana had already started to clear out the belongings of Steve. She had already begun taking all of his clothes, all of his personal items, and she donated them all to the Veterans Affairs. I was almost knocked off my feet to see the number of hangers, empty hangers in that closet, with not a single stitch of clothes. A lot of watches missing, a lot of jewelry missing. His wedding ring was missing, and the claims of Lana about Steve not having will raise further suspicions. That is something that Steve and I and Steve and many other people had discussed, was how important it was to make sure that everything was in order. There is absolutely no logic in my brother, an accountant, a person who is meticulous with his finances, not having a will. The family felt like something was not adding up. We are all on the same page here. We know something is going on. And that was when we called the medical examiner office and said, hey, please do an autopsy. And at the very least, if you're not going to do that, do a toxicology. And they agreed to it. Detective Moats of the York County Sheriff's Office was also notified of the suspicions of the family about the death of Steve. Good morning, everybody. But when the autopsy report came in, it listed signs of heart disease and pointed to death by natural causes. Ah, yes, thank you. The initial autopsy still showed that it was likely a heart attack, but they had to wait for the report of the toxicologist to come back to finally make an actual finding. It would take a few weeks before those results arrived. So they waited on pins and needles for the truth to come out. They just knew that there was something very wrong. Thank you. When the toxicology report on the blood of Steve Clayton came back, it was shocking. It showed traces of several sedatives, including marijuana, temazepam, and Benadryl. But that was not all. The biggest shock in the toxicology results was tetrahydrozoline, also known as THC. It is the active ingredient in eye drops like Visine, Murine, or other over-the-counter eye drops. THC is not ever meant to be ingested. Given in small doses, it makes you feel very ill. It makes you nauseous. It makes you dizzy. It will make you pass out eventually. But in large quantities, it is deadly. It shuts your central nervous system down, and it will kill you. The detectives learned that THC can limit the blood supply to vital organs, leading to a heart attack. When the body cam went up there, the Visine that you see was on the tall dresser. That is away from the bed. That is where he could not get up to get the Visine. Now, it was very clear this is not a natural death. Detective Moats needed to have a talk with Lana Clayton. 5 weeks after the sudden death of her husband, Lana Clayton was questioned by detectives. You know, if you were a witness in this case for us, the detectives wanted to know more about the medications found in the blood of Steve. You know what he would say? He took Benadryl. It is a long list, but there is no mention of THC, the drug that killed Steve. It is colorless, it is odorless, and it is tasteless, which makes it the perfect thing to give to someone if you want to poison them. The level of THC in the blood of Steve was so high that it was clear that it was a cause of death. It is a lethal level, no matter what way you look at it. The detectives pressed on. Somehow or another, there was a large amount of Visine in his system. So that is what we are trying to get to the bottom of. I know he puts the Visine in his coffee. He puts it in there every day. What do you know about it? What I know about it? I know it makes you have diarrhea. There were basically two things that the police were now considering. 1, he was poisoned. There was foul play. 2, he ingested it on his own, whether it was intentional or unintentional. But as police probed the relationship of Steve and Lana, how has your life been? Sometimes we would have fun and everything, and then sometimes I would be on eggshells all the time. I was on eggshells. Lana claimed that Steve had a dark side. He can be really nasty. What does nasty Steve look like? He is really verbally abusive, calling me names. Like what would he call you? I do not know. Stupid. Bitch. I do not know. Just all kind of things. I could see it escalating until you notice just, try and stay out his way. After the interview of Lana, detectives ordered a search of the house. They were looking for cups or glasses that had a residue in them. They were looking for anything they can find that helped them determine what could have caused this. Anything document-wise that would show trouble in the marriage. But during that time, Lana told the officer that she wanted to speak again with Detective Moats. Detective Moats recorded what Lana had to say. I told you a little bit about Stephen. That it was worse than what I told you. He was verbally and physically abusive. Lana, for God's sake. And yell at me and call me names. His anger built up, I would do something that would irritate him, until the point where he would explode. Okay, what are you trying to do, huh? After he had that incident, which he said it was vertigo, and I was taking care of him and everything, but I was still so angry. And my girlfriend at work told me, you want to get even with somebody, Put Visine in a drink. It will cause diarrhea. It was then that Lana dropped a bombshell. When I saw that Visine on the table, it just came back to me, and I just took and squirted it. And what did you squirt it into? His water. Into his water? So you do not know the full amount. I mean, you just squeezed. I think I put the whole thing in. So the whole bottle? I think I did. I squeezed it hard. I just saw it there and I just did it. What are your plans tonight now? Just stay here. You will be okay. I know it is a lot on your plate. Just what if I do? What if I cause his death with the Visine? Anything else that you want to add? No. If there is more, get off your chest. That is it. It was a damning confession, but the detectives could not arrest Lana just yet. After Lana confessed, the police left. They got their ducks in a row as far as what charges would be made, and they were ready to come back the next day to arrest Lana Clayton. But early that morning, they got a call from one of the neighbors of Lana. They found notes of suicide. They were afraid that she had harmed herself. She knew the police were coming back the next day, and she knew they would have warrants for arrest. She turned the gas on and went upstairs and took some pills to kill herself. They found her unconscious in her bed. She was taken into the hospital where she was treated and ultimately released, and then immediately arrested on the charges of murder and tampering with food items. The family was informed of the arrest of Lana. A detective from York County called me and said, "Hey, Nick, I just want to bring you up to speed here. Lana confessed." And I pulled over right away. It hit me like a ton of bricks, literally like a baseball bat to the face. I answered the phone, and Rosemary was on the other end screaming that she killed him. On January 16th, 2020, Lana accepted a plea deal and admitted guilt on charges of voluntary manslaughter and tampering with a drug or food product. The original indictment was for murder. You were pleading to a lesser offense, voluntary manslaughter. My own knowledge of it was by watching movies and the cause of discomfort and diarrhea. Lana insisted she never intended for Steve to die and just wanted revenge for his abuse. But his friends and family did not buy that Steve was ever abusive. She tries to assassinate the character of Steve because other people who knew him and who he had. Menard came forward to say he was a wonderful person. There was no abuse of any sort with Stephen. She was trying to do whatever she could to save herself from a very, very, very long sentence and possibly the death penalty. But he was a gentle soul, not capable of harming someone. Based on the toxicology report, the prosecutors believe Steve suffered for 3 days before dying. Lana told us that the fatal dose was on Thursday morning. But we know as a matter of scientific fact from the toxicologist that is impossible. He would have died Thursday morning if he had ingested that Thursday morning. For him to have been sick all of that time, it indicates that she continually gave him medication throughout that time, poisoned him with Visine little by little. And Lana, a nurse, never sought to help him after the initial poisoning. Stephen would not have stayed in a urine-soaked mattress. He was a clean freak. He would not have stood for such a thing. He was too weak to get up and move. There was no phone in the house. There was no landline, so he could not call somebody. So this put him in a situation of being tortured with no way to get help. And so finally she knew Saturday, that is it. And she squeezed that whole bottle of Visine into his water, had him drink it, and then went out to mow the grass. So she did not have to watch the horror of his death. Instead of a nurse that helps, she is the nurse from hell. 53-year-old Lana Clayton was sentenced to 25 years in prison. She never admitted that she intended to kill Steve, but the facts showed otherwise. I feel like there is no penalty that would have been great enough for Lana. This was 3 days of methodically poisoning my best friend, and then killing him. The thought process that had to go into her putting on this charade. And she carried that right on through till the end, and I think that is the definition of a monster. But Lana almost got away with it. There almost was not an autopsy. If there had not been an autopsy, the ruling of the coroner would have been, this was likely a heart episode, and it was natural causes. The truth is she did this to herself, Had she been just the same quiet, gentle Lana, grieving the loss of Steve, no one would have had any suspicion whatsoever. Although Lana insisted the death of Steve was unintentional, his family and the prosecution believed it was a deliberate act motivated by financial gain. One obvious and glaring motive was the wealth of Steve. Without a will in the state of South Carolina, everything goes to the spouse. So Lana would know, if Steve is gone, I get everything. If somebody wanted to do something malicious like this, all they had to do was get rid of the will, and everything belonged to them. The family tried to move on without Steve in their lives. Hello. I mean, I miss a lot about Steve, but I miss his voice. I miss hearing his voice. This is my way of, getting away from the emotional stuff. I think what I miss about Steve is his over-the-top personality. This big, boisterous, gregarious character that enters a room and just takes over everything. Steve was an amazing person. It has been difficult not having him around. The thing I miss the most about Steve is his laughter and his ability to light up a room. Stephen was stolen from everyone who loved him. Steve was stolen from everyone who loved him. And while the void left by his absence can never be filled, those who knew him continue to keep the spirit of his kindness alive, reflecting on the man who gave so much of himself to others, never expecting anything in return. The legacy of Steve is not found in the material wealth he left behind, but in the lessons he taught, the young men he mentored, and the love he showed his family. A love that persists in their memories long after he has departed. His sisters, his nephews, and his friends remain united by the bond he helped nurture, ensuring that his influence remains a beacon of light in their lives. They look back at the moments captured on film, the laughter at weddings, the playful games with the children, and they choose to focus on those rather than the darkness that marked his final hours. They carry his stories, they repeat his catchphrases, and in doing so, they ensure that the memory of their dear Steve remains forever present. They know that while the ending of his life was tragic, the life itself was a testament to the power of human connection, generosity, and joy. It is a story of how one person, through a simple act of saying hello, could change the lives of those he encountered, and how that impact reverberates even years later. They continue to gather, not just in mourning, but in celebration of a man who taught them how to live, how to love, and how to cherish every single moment with those they hold dear. And as they move forward, they do so with the knowledge that the kindness they show to others is the truest way to honor the man who is their brother, their mentor, and their hero. Each time they help someone, each time they mentor a young person looking for direction, each time they find humor in the face of sadness, they are honoring the memory of Steve Clayton. He lives on through their laughter, through their resilience, and through the unwavering belief that the world is a better place because he was in it. Though the circumstances of his passing were shrouded in deceit, the truth of his life was built on transparency and love. It is a reminder to all of us to appreciate the people in our lives, to recognize the value of the bonds we share, and to never take for granted the time we have with those who matter most. Steve would have wanted them to continue living fully, to continue being generous, and to continue finding reasons to smile. And so that is exactly what they do, day by day, year by year, keeping his spirit alive in every heartbeat and every memory. The journey they have taken since his departure has not been easy, but it has been one defined by a collective effort to seek justice, to find peace, and to preserve the light that was Steve. Their story, while started with shock and ending in a courtroom, finds its true center in the enduring love of a brother and the lasting impact of a truly good man. They continue to hold him in their thoughts, his voice echoing in their memories, always ready with a friendly greeting, always ready to brighten the day. Hello. It is a sound that will forever define their love for him. And in the quiet moments when they gather to share their stories, they find that his presence is still felt, a warm and comforting reminder that even in the face of the greatest challenges, love remains the most powerful force of all. The family continues to grow, and the new generations who never had the chance to meet Steve will come to know him through the tales of his generosity, his humor, and his unwavering spirit. They will know him as a man who danced at weddings, who played on the floor with the children, and who gave his time to anyone who needed it. They will know him as a man who loved deeply and lived well. And in that way, he is never truly gone. He is woven into the fabric of their lives. A constant reminder of what it means to be a good person, a good brother, and a good friend. The path to healing is long, but they walk it together, supported by the memories and the knowledge that they did everything they could to honor him and to seek the truth. They stand together, a family united by love and tempered by experience, ready to face whatever comes next, carrying the light of Steve with them forever and always. Their hearts may have been broken, but they have learned to mend, to grow, and to continue in a way that he would have wanted them to, with grace, with strength, and with a commitment to kindness. The story of Steve Clayton is not just a story of a tragic ending. It is a story of a beautiful life, a life that touched so many others and left a mark that time cannot erase. It is a story of a man whose essence was kindness, and whose legacy will be felt for years to come by. Everyone who had the privilege of knowing him. In the end, it is that love, that kindness, and that legacy that would define his memory, standing tall against the shadows that tried to obscure him, a true testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. The family remains, and as they go on, they carry the spirit of Steve, the man of the big personality and the even bigger heart, the man who knew the value of a kind word and the importance of being there for others. He is with them always, in the laughter of the children, in the stories shared at family dinners, and in the quiet strength they find in each other. They honor him every day, and in doing so, they find their own path forward, one filled with the hope and the light that he so generously shared with all of them during his lifetime. The story continues, as all stories do, but the memory of Steve remains at its heart, a constant reminder of a life well lived and a love that never fades. They walk forward with his memory as their guiding star, always remembering his laugh, his smile, and his constant greeting to the world, hello, hello, hello. And in that simple, rhythmic phrase, they find the comfort of knowing that while he may be gone, he is never truly away, always present in the love they share for one another and the legacy of kindness he left behind. The world might have lost a great man, but his family kept the best parts of him, nurturing them, sharing them, and keeping the light of his life shining bright, regardless of the darkness. They choose to live, they choose to love, and they choose to always remember the man who was, in every sense of the word, a true and genuine person. Steve Clayton may have departed this life, but he remains a part of their story, a part of their hearts, and a part of everything they do. And as they move through the days ahead, they do so with a renewed appreciation for life and a steadfast commitment to the values that Steve held dear, ensuring that his influence is felt by generations to come. The journey of their lives goes on, and in every step, they carry the spirit of Steve, the man who was and will always be a cherished part of who they are. They are the keepers of his story, and they tell it with love, with pride, and with the joy that he brought into their lives. And in that, they find the ultimate triumph of his life over everything else. A life that is remembered for the joy he brought to the world and the love he left in the hearts of those who knew him best. His legacy is secure, written in the memories of his loved ones and reflected in the kindness they share with others. He lives on, not just in their thoughts, but in their actions, in their words, and in the love they continue to share with each other every single day. This is the story of a successful and generous businessman, a man who loved his family, who mentored the youth, and who lived his life with a spirit that was as large as his heart. And though his journey ended too soon, the impact of his life will continue to be felt for many, many years to come. The family will always be grateful for the time they had with him, and they will always honor the man who taught them what it truly means to be there for the people you love. He was Steve, the man with the big smile, the big laugh, and the heart that was even bigger, and he will never be forgotten by those who had the fortune to call him theirs. They moved forward, united by the memory of his life and the hope that his story serves as a reminder to always appreciate the people we love, to always be generous with our time, and always greet the world with an open heart. Hello, 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 they say, and in that, they know he is listening, he is smiling, and he is with them always, forever, and in every way that counts. The chapter may have closed on his life, but the book of his legacy is far from finished, and his family will continue to write it, one act of kindness, one smile, and one shared memory at a time, keeping his spirit alive in the world, forever shining bright. They are the beneficiaries of his love, and they are the stewards of his memory, and together they ensure that the story of Steve Clayton is told with the same love, humor, and heart that he lived by every day. His life was a gift, and they honor that gift by living their own lives with the same commitment to love and kindness that he showed them. And in that commitment, they find the peace that passes understanding, a peace that only comes from knowing that they're doing exactly what he would have wanted them to do, honoring him in the best way they know how, by living well, by loving deeply, and by always being there for each other. This is a story of Steve, and it is a story that will continue to inspire and uplift all those who hear it, a testament to the power of a life lived with love and the enduring nature of the spirit of a truly great man. He was their brother, their father figure, and their friend, and he will remain all those things in their hearts, always, in every way that truly matters, for the rest of their lives. And as they move forward, they carry the warmth of his love with them, a constant reminder of the man he was, and the man they strive to be, always honoring him, always remembering him, and always feeling his presence in the beauty of the world he loved so much. The story of Steve Clayton is a story of a life that mattered, a life that touched so many, and a life that will be remembered for all the right reasons, a life of light, a life of love, and a life of true and enduring goodness. And they, his family, are the ones who make sure that this story continues to be told, ensuring that his influence remains a beacon of hope and a source of inspiration for everyone who hears it, a truly lasting tribute to a truly remarkable man. They know that he will be proud of them, and that knowledge is the greatest comfort of all, as they continue to live their lives, honor his memory, and cherish the time they had with him, the man who was and will always be their beloved Steve. The journey goes on, and in the midst of it all, they find the comfort of the memories they share, the laughter they hold in their hearts, and the enduring love that they will always have for the man who was such an integral part of their lives, the man who taught them how to live, how to love, and how to be the best versions of themselves every single day. This is their story. This is his story. And this is a legacy of love that will live on forever in the hearts of all who knew him. The story of Steve is one that reminds them that even in the face of tragedy, love and memory can provide the strength to carry on, to find joy again, and to continue to make a difference in the world, just as he did. They are the legacy of Steve Clayton, and they will honor him forever in everything they do. They remember his voice, his smile, his kindness, and the way he made everyone feel special, and they share those things with the world, ensuring that his spirit continues to light the way for others, just as he always did for them. They are family, and they are stronger for having known him, for having loved him, and for continuing to carry his story forward, a story of hope, of resilience, and of an enduring, unshakable love that will never fade. And as they continue on their journey, they do so with his memory as their guiding star, a constant reminder that love is the most important thing of all, and that his impact will be felt in every act of kindness they perform, in every smile they share, and in every life they touch, in his honor and in his memory, always and forever. The end of his story is the beginning of theirs, a life lived in his shadow and in his light, and they carry that forward with pride, with love, and with the knowledge that he is always with them, guiding them, watching over them, and loving them, just as he always has, in the way that only a brother, a father figure, and a friend like Steve could. Their journey is a testament to man he was, a tribute to the life he lived, and a promise that his legacy of love will live on forever in the hearts of those who loved him most. This is their story. This is his story. And this is a legacy that lives on every single day in the love they share for one another and in the memory of the man who gave them so much. And in that love, they find the strength to continue, to thrive and honor him forever and always. Their story, the story of the Clayton family, is a story of enduring love, of resilience, and of the strength that comes from family. And it is a story that will never be forgotten, for it is the story of Steve, their beloved Steve, who continues to live on in their hearts and their minds in the love they share, and in the joy they choose to bring into the world every single day. The legacy of Steve Clayton, the man of the big heart, the big smile, and the constant, enthusiastic hello, 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 is a legacy of love that will never, ever end. They know that he is looking down on